I'm Lieutenant Commander Kate Cunningham, and today I'm going to talk about the Surface Commander Command Board. I'll cover the following. The annual Commander Command Board is typically held in the first or second week of December. The convening date is posted on the Post Department Head My Navy HR webpage here. The PERS 411 detailers send engagements emails out to all officers up for their first, second, or third look, so those officers are tracking their command qualification due date, correspondence due date, and have an opportunity to ask questions ahead of the board convening. Our contact list is fed by INFAS and INSIPS, so please ensure those databases are up to date so you receive these detailer notifications. This year's fiscal year 24 Commander Command Board convenes on 05 December. Command qualifications are due to TICOM 04 November, and all board correspondence is due 25 November. Look timing is based on your YCS, or Years of Commissioned Service. Officers receive their first look for Commander Command at YCS 12, which is YCS 12.5 for May commissions, since the board convenes annually in December. If an officer is command qualified by their first look, they are eligible to screen for XOCO afloat. If they are not command qualified by their first look and do not have an approved delayed look, their record will not go in front of the board since they are not eligible to screen for XOCO afloat, but that board convening will still count as their first look. If an officer does not screen for XOCO afloat first look, they have another opportunity to screen at YCS 13 the following year. If second look officers are command qualified, they are eligible to screen for any second look Commander Command milestone. We'll talk through how that apportionment process works shortly. If a second look officer is not command qualified, they are only eligible to screen for XO afloat asterisk, or XO special mission. If an officer screens XOCO afloat on first or second look, they can anticipate slating for their XOCO tour around the time they select for 05, which is typically between YCS 14 and 15. XOCO afloat screened officers begin the XO pipeline no later than YCS 16, but that can be earlier based on individual timing. If an officer screens for XO afloat asterisk, or XO special mission on their second look, they should anticipate slating 2 to 3 months after the board results are released and typically begin XO pipeline 9 months after screening. That timeline ensures that officer will have the opportunity to receive an observed fit rep as an XO prior to receiving their third and final look for command. Here's a list of example XO billets officers may slate to following screening at their second look for XO afloat asterisk, or XO special mission. Officers receive their third and final look for Commander Command at YCS 15, 2 years after screening for an XO milestone. Officers who are command qualified going into that third look are eligible to screen for CO afloat and CO special mission. If an officer screens for either command milestone, they can proceed directly into the CO pipeline or execute 12 months of shore duty prior to proceeding into their CO tour. Those two options are driven by tour timing and the officer's preference. Some of the CO special mission jobs listed here are shared with other communities, so timing doesn't always support direct input slating. Keep in mind an officer must be qualified EOW and TAO prior to beginning any XO or CO milestone tour, and JPME Phase 1 must be complete prior to beginning any operational command tour. Screening for XOCO afloat, XO afloat asterisk, or XO special mission maximizes a SWO's opportunity to select for 05. Our community values for 05 are listed here. Please ensure your Commander Command milestone screening status is explicitly stated in Block 41 on your fit reps following your selection for any milestone. Because the Commander Command Board convenes in December each year and the 05 Board convenes in February, you will likely need to submit the Commander Command selection results to the 05 Board as a letter to the Board to ensure the 05 Board members are tracking your milestone selection. If an officer fails to select for an XO milestone or for a command milestone at their third and final look, they should anticipate executing a sea shore rotation and will remain with the PERS 411 detailers. Please refer to the downstream fill list on the Post Department Head My Navy HR page for the listing of available 04 and 05 sea and shore billets. We've talked through eligibility and the impact of selection and non-selection. Let's discuss special look requests. There are 2 types of special look requests that can be submitted to administrative boards: delayed looks and special additional looks. Delayed looks are approved by the PERS 41 director. Only the board can deny a delayed look. All special additional looks get approved or denied by the board. A delayed look must be able to demonstrate an officer was uniquely disadvantaged compared to their peers. These unique disadvantage notionally puts the officer in jeopardy of failing to screen at their scheduled look. Examples of delayed looks that have been approved in the past have largely been related to exceptional circumstances resulting in an officer not yet being complete with their department head tour by their first look, an officer not yet complete with their command qualification due to no fault of their own, or an XO screened officer who has not yet received an XO milestone fit rep prior to their third and final look for command. A special additional look request is a tool to petition the board to get another look after an officer has already received their third and final look. The request gets reviewed by the board and must demonstrate a record was unfairly considered in the normal board process. If a special additional look request is approved, that record gets briefed and voted with the third look records. Special requests must be coordinated with your detailer via email. Please do not submit a special look request via the BOL board correspondence submission process. If neither of the two special look requests apply to you, there still may be some documents we recommend submitting to the board. In order to know what to send into the board, you need to know what information is missing or might need to be explained in your record. The 3 places to check are all found via the BOL main menu. You'll want to check your Officer Summary Report or OSR, your Performance Summary Report or PSR, and your OMPF, Official Military Personnel File. When the board is voting a record, only your OSR and PSR will be displayed in the tank. You're able to view them in this similar tank format by selecting Generate PDF on BOL for each respective product. Let's look at this example. First look, Year Group 10 OSR. First thing you should look at is your command qualification status under your special qualifications, since this drives XOCO afloat screening eligibility. Once an officer completes their command qualification, they need to send their completion paperwork to their TICOM Force Navigator for processing. Once processed, your detailer is notified and will add the LN7 SWO-specific command qualification and 2D1 Navy-wide command qualification to your OSR. This typically takes about 2 weeks to populate on your OSR after we manually add it in. That's why the command qualification due date is earlier than the board correspondence due date on BOL. Next, you want to ensure your EOW and TAO qualifications are accurately reflected. Special qualifications is also where JPME Phase 1 will appear once completed and processed by PERS 450. Ensure any completed graduate or master's degrees are correctly accounted for under education. Same with awards. Missing education and awards are the most common issues on an OSR. If you are in the middle of a PCS, your present duty station and billet will be updated by an assistant recorder to reflect the billet you are inbound to. When you pull up your PSR, recommend scanning the dates first to ensure you're not missing any fitness reports. The 4th link down on the BOL main menu, labeled CCA, FitRep, Eval Reports, allows you to run a quick continuity check. The PSR dates are written as month, day, year, so this first date of 052310 is May 23rd, 2010. The follow-on report should pick up on the day after the previous report closed out. If you have a gap less than 90 days, there's likely a letter of extension covering that time. Please verify if the letter of extension is in your OMPF. If it is, an assistant recorder will manually update your PSR dates for the purposes of the board. If the letter of extension is not in your OMPF, or you are missing a fit rep from your PSR, please use the resources on My Navy HR to permanently update your record. Detailers are only authorized to update non-joint AQDs. Please also validate your PSR for accuracy compared to your fit rep hard copies. We'll use this first observed fit rep as an example. Your individual trait average is here, and the summary group average is here. Those numbers should match block 45 on your fit rep. There were 10 officers in this summary group, so between Jane Paula Jones and the other 9 officers, all of their trait averages averaged out to be 3.62, meaning Jane Paula Jones was 0.18 above the summary group average. Reporting seniors' cumulative average, or RISCA, is not written on a fit rep and gets calculated at the beginning of the month, 90 days after a fit rep closes out and is processed by PERS 32. Reporting seniors should closely manage their RISCA and should tell you what their RISCA is for your rank during your fit rep debrief. RISCA is the average of every officer they have ever completed a fitness report on in your rank. The RISCA on this report is 3.55, meaning of all the 18 ensigns this reporting senior has ever observed, Jane Paula Jones ranked 0.25 above that average. Boards typically highlight your risk delta, vice the summary group average, since it is the cumulative ranking from that reporting senior. After you verify your FitRep data is accurate, ensure your promotion recommendations and PRT information are all correct. Here's a list of example letter to the board submissions that have historically been submitted to the Commander-Command Board. The most common board correspondence is the most recent October 04 periodic FitRep. Once FitReps are submitted by your command, they may take up to 3 months to process into your record. To ensure the board can see that transfer or periodic FitRep, you should submit it on BOL. Please also send missing FitReps to your PERS 411 detailer and the Commander-Command Board email alias listed here ahead of the board correspondence due date. If you submit correspondence to a board, understand it will only update your record for the purposes of that board. You must utilize the MyNavy HR resources previously mentioned to update your record permanently. Submitting correspondence to a board is a very quick process and is done via the ESSBD link on BOL. Letters to the board have to be addressed in the tank by the board member briefing your record, so only submit information missing from your record or information that you want shared with all the board members. This year's Commander-Command correspondence due date is 25 November. Correspondence is due in advance of the board convening so the assistant recorders can validate that the records are as accurate as possible. Assistant recorders are the only personnel who can update a record with information available in an OMPF or letter to the board submission. Any change they make appears in light gray on an OSR and PSR, so the board members know a modification has been made. Prior to the arrival of the assistant recorders, every record is reviewed by the PERS 41 team at least 3 times. We look for missing information so we can reach out to those officers and ensure they have the opportunity to update that information ahead of the correspondence due date. These reviews ensure every record is as accurate as possible ahead of the board convening and assures the board members that if information is missing from the record, every effort has been made to provide that officer an opportunity to correct the issue. We provide forceful backup to the best of our ability, but you are ultimately responsible for the accuracy of your record and should ensure your record is consistently board ready. During the PERS 41 record reviews, we also review the already screened records looking for any de-screened tripwires. These tripwires apply to the department head, Commander-Command, and Major Command boards. Once an officer screens for any administrative milestone, their record moves to the bank. Commander-Command bank officers get reviewed until an officer is serving in the milestone tour they were screened for. For example, if an officer was selected for XO CO afloat, their record will get reviewed for tripwires every year after screening until that officer is serving in their CO afloat tour. If a bank record trips any of these tripwires between screening and that officer serving in their milestone tour, their record moves to the decertification list for board action. Decertification records get reviewed by the board members, and it's up to the assigned briefer to find why that particular record was put in the decertification bank and make a recommendation on if that record should maintain its screening status or be de-screened. After that briefer reads through the record, marks it up, and makes a recommendation decision, all decertification records get briefed and voted in the tank. On the first day of the board members receive training along with guidance from the board president. After all material has been presented and questions from the members have all been answered, they begin reading through and marking up records in the selection boardroom. Each board member gets randomly assigned records to mark up and grade. Board members are prohibited from requesting specific records to mark up and brief. If they are unable to impartially brief an assigned record, they must request the record be reassigned to a different board member. The board member reviewing your record has access to everything in your OMPF, along with any BOL submissions. They are not allowed to bring writing supplies into the tank during the briefing and voting portion, so it's up to them to add any amplifying notes and grading justification to your OSR and PSR that they want to include in their brief. Briefers must assign a letter grade to each record before they can move on to the next record. Historical record grades are included here for transparency and to emphasize the importance of an officer's department head performance. The letter grades correlate to what the briefer recommends the other voting members should select on their handset. As a briefer is talking through their marked up record in the tank, each board member will be holding a handset and will vote a confidence factor for that record. The confidence scale ranges from 100 to 0, with 100 correlating to the board member being completely confident that officer should be selected, and 0 being confident that officer should not be selected. The records get briefed in the tank access point is secured during each voting session, and no specific discussions that occur in the tank can be brought up outside the tank. All personnel involved in the board must follow the strict confidentiality rules contained in the board precept and convening order. Board members can only brief what is in the record. All board members have the voting handset and a laser pointer, so if they want to highlight something in the record, they can do so with their laser pointer or address the issue out loud. A record is displayed, briefed, and voted on quickly. The briefer continues to brief until the final board member has voted. A PERS 41 auctioneer announces how many remaining votes there are to ensure the briefer knows to continue briefing and to keep the voting process moving. Once the vote is complete, the overall confidence factor for that record will be displayed and announced by the auctioneer. In this 5 board member example, 2 board members voted 100, 175, 150, and 10. A 0 vote is a no vote. Any other vote higher than 0 is a yes vote. All the votes averaged together generate the confidence score. The auctioneer would announce 4 for 65, meaning 4 board members voted yes, and all the scores averaged to be 65. That score is recorded electronically and manually in vote books by support staff before the head recorder moves on to the next record. Here's what an example confidence vote looks like in the tank. I'll now brief an example record so you can see what information gets pulled by the briefer and how quickly the process goes. This example will be for a first look record and include 18 voting board members. This is my record. Letter to the board is her October periodic fit rep and her most recent transfer commendation medal. Her fit rep had populated on her PSR in time, and an assistant recorder added the com here. I gave Jane an A and have already pressed 100. Let me tell you why. Command qualification complete, EOW, TAO, Masters, and JPME Phase 1 complete. Reported to PERS in March last year. She's not scared to take a heavy lift community job. Jane completely crushed her department head rides. All her COs gushed about her in Block 41. In her transfer fit rep from Stout, her CO said Arleigh Burke himself would give Jane the keys to his ship, and that fit rep came with a 5.0 to match the words. Let's take a look at her PSR. Jane has been above RISCA since the birth of Bud Weeks, but let's focus in on her department head tours. Gets the MP after 12 months on board, but Block 41 states she's only number 2 to CSO, who's been on board for more than 2 years, and their performance is the same. Next fit rep, she takes number 1 EP and sets a home up in EP land for the remainder of her department head rides. Soft breakouts on every fit rep. Every CO says she's ready for command today. Commander command afloat and early command consistently in Block 40. Just look at the RISCA these reporting seniors are burning on her. I don't know what more we could ask for from a future CO. Jane is it. Fully qualified, proven sustained performance as C. She's ready for command. Press 100. 18 for 100. The head recorder would now ask for the next record. This vote of 18 for 100 means all 18 board members were 100% confident Jane was ready for XOCO afloat selection on her first look. The board would continue until all first look records had been briefed and voted, which would include roughly 125 records. 125 records would likely take 2 tanks of voting before all records had been briefed and voted. A typical tank lasts an hour and consists of 75 to 100 records at a time. This ensures board members have an opportunity to mentally and physically recover between voting sessions and provides them the time they need to thoroughly review and mark records up prior to briefing them. After all first look records had been briefed and voted, the scattergram will be displayed for the board members. Here's an example scattergram for 125 first look commander-command records. The far left and right hand columns are selection status. The score columns represent confidence factors. The eligibles number is the amount of records that received the respective confidence factor listed next to them. And the total number is the cumulative total number of records starting at 100 all the way down to 0, accounting for all 125 records in the first look cohort. The total number helps the board to see how many total records received a confidence factor of 80 or above, or 70 and above. You'll see shortly how that column assists in the selection process. Board members are provided minimum and maximum selection numbers in the convening order that they read ahead of beginning the board process. In this example of 125 first look records, we'll say they are authorized to select up to 50 records. When the scattergram gets initially displayed, the board president will discuss how they'd like to proceed. After a thorough discussion and likely some trial maneuvers, the President will open the floor up for motions to tentatively select or tentatively remove records from consideration. Any records that remain after all motions have been passed are considered crunch records, and the board then decides how they'd like to proceed. We'll walk through this scattergram example of 125 records to select 50. Board members typically begin the discussion utilizing natural breaks and outliers in the scattergram. For instance, the pattern on this scattergram reflects a fairly even spread of records, 85 and above, with a drop-off at 55. Some scattergrams have very clear patterns, others can be more difficult to discern. Since this is all first-look records, the board would likely demand records to have scored a high confidence factor in order to be selected. A score of 95 means only 3 of 18 board members weren't 100% confident that records should be selected. If they selected the records with a confidence factor of 95 and above, that would give them 34 total selects, leaving 91 records to select 16. They could decide to rebrief and vote all 91 records and review that scattergram, or decide to take some records off the bottom. If a record doesn't get selected first look, those records have another opportunity to screen at a future board. If this was a second or third look scattergram, the discussion regarding which records should be removed from further consideration would likely be longer because the implications for those records to permanently remain unselected carries more weight for those unscreened officers. The other part of the discussion ahead of motions being made is talking through how many records and what confidence scale range is appropriate for the crunch. The board could make all maximum and minimum selections on this initial scattergram, but that's very rare. Leaving crunch records to get another look and re-examine a revised scattergram is much more common. Boards generally want a 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 selection crunch ratio. For example, crunch 6 records to select 3, or 9 to select 3. In this instance, we'll say the board has decided they intend to review and brief remaining low A through C records again, and they want to aim for a 2-to-1 crunch ratio. Boards vary on tentatively selecting records first or tentatively removing records from further consideration first, but they typically make one motion at a time so all the board members understand which exact motion they're voting on. Looking at this scattergram and understanding the board's crunch intentions, I'll walk through an example motion process. Following a thorough discussion that has resulted in a general group consensus on how they'd like to proceed, the president will say, "I'm ready for a motion." One of the board members initiates the first motion by saying, "I make a motion to tentatively select those records with a confidence factor of 95 and above." A different board member would say, "I second." The head recorder would now initiate a vote on that motion and say, "Mrs. President, a motion with a second has been made to tentatively select those records with a confidence factor of 95 and above. If you agree, vote 100 for yes. If you do not agree, vote 0 for no. An overall score of 50% or greater confirms the motion." Everyone would then press their vote. The head recorder would announce, "Mrs. President, the vote is 18 for 100, the motion carries. Mrs. President and members of the board, you have tentatively selected 34 records. You have 91 records remaining to select 16. The board would continue their discussion on how they would like to proceed, and once a general consensus is made, the president would announce, "I'm ready for a motion." Board member would initiate the second motion by saying, "I make a motion to tentatively remove from further consideration those records with a confidence factor of 65 and below." A different board member would say, "I second." The head recorder would initiate the vote on that motion and say, "Mrs. President, a motion with a second has been made to tentatively remove from further consideration those records with a confidence factor of 65 and below. If you agree, vote 100 for yes. If you do not agree, vote 0 for no. An overall score of 50% or greater confirms the motion." Everyone would then press their vote. The head recorder would announce, "Mrs. President, the vote is 18 for 100, the motion carries." Mrs. President and members of the board, you have tentatively removed 53 records from further consideration. You have 38 records remaining to select 16. The board would now discuss if they'd like to continue with any further motions or not in order to refine the crunch record ratio. In this example, the ratio is roughly 2-to-1, and the board would like to crunch all 38 remaining records. The head recorder would then ask the president if they accept the scattergram. The president accepts the scattergram, and the board members now discuss in the tank how they would like to crunch the remaining records. Only the records that have neither been tentatively selected or tentatively removed from further consideration get voted on again in the crunch. Crunch options are dependent on the board and on the remaining records being crunched. The most common crunch option is for all remaining records to be reassigned to a new briefer, marked up, and briefed back in the tank by the new briefer. This gives those records a new board member with a different perspective, and they get to decide if, after thoroughly reviewing everything in the record, if they agree or disagree with the initial briefer. And then they get the opportunity to brief their grade and justification ahead of the record receiving another vote. The second briefer's notes are added in a different color on top of the initial briefer's OSR and PSR comments. Additional crunch options are listed here. Following the crunch votes, the board members will continue with the scattergram process for that cohort of officers until all selections have been made. The scattergram process for the Commander-Command second look cohort works differently than the other cohorts because of the XO apportionment process. Once the board has completed their selection for XO-CO afloat, they keep the scattergram of the remaining second look command qualified records up in the tank and have the opportunity to make motions to apportion records from that scattergram directly to XO afloat prior to reviewing the records of second look officers not yet command qualified. Here's an example final look scattergram from those command qualified second look officers. The records included in the scattergram have already been through a crunch, so the records displayed have been briefed and voted on twice. 45 total records were selected for XO-CO fleet up from the second look cohort, 26 selected from the first review, and 19 selected from this crunch. Prior to accepting the scattergram, the board gets to decide if they want to apportion some of these records to be selected for XO afloat. In this example, the board is authorized to select a maximum of 35 XO afloat officers. They haven't seen the records of the second look officers not yet command qualified, so it is unlikely they will select all 35 XO afloat officers from the scattergram alone, but there are 14 records ranging between 75 and 80 that were very close to screening for XO-CO afloat. The board expressed high confidence that these records were ready for command, so following discussion, they decide to apportion those 14 to XO afloat. The president would announce, "I'm ready for a motion." A board member would initiate the motion by saying, "I make a motion that we apportion those records with a confidence factor of 75 to 80 to XO afloat." A different board member would say, "I second." The board would then vote on that motion and accept the scattergram prior to reviewing all remaining second look records. The apportionment process works similarly when the board works through the next second look scattergram and apportions records to XO afloat asterisks, and XO special mission. Here's a review of the overall board process. After all cohorts have been voted, scattergram process is completed, and tentative selects determined, the board members vote to confirm each set of cohorts. A debrief is conducted, and the board members and assistant recorders are sworn out. The board adjourns, and all board members and assistant recorders sign the board report. The board report is then routed for approval. Once a board report is routed and results are officially approved, they get posted along with the board convening order and board membership to the My Navy HR page here. Results are also emailed out to all eligible officers by the PERS 411 detailers, so screened officers have the selection results to submit as a letter to the board for the 05 board. Here are the historic Commander-Command Board selection metrics from the last 2 years. Superior performance at sea has consistently been the primary selection factor. Ship type and home port have not impacted selection. Boards have wanted to see that officers performed well regardless of the command employment or ship location they were billeted to. In summary, we covered the following topics. Thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to watch this. Have a great rest of your day.